know somebody that's single, may need this information like right now, come and hang out or bring them. We're going to be talking about things like divorce. We're going to be talking about things like blended families. And we're also going to talk about the Bible's model for marriage, which is what Pastor Ron is talking about in Harbor City today. So I just figured it'd be great to have a series where we just talk about issues that are relevant to your life, and to have the talk that we usually don't like to have. Okay, so today, I'm going to be your dad. And I know this is kind of weird because some of you, you look at me as kind of your son, or, I can be as young as your children are right now. But I'm going to be your dad, and we're going to do the sex talk. Now, here's the thing about the sex talk. How many of you remember your parents talking to you about sex? Okay, you don't have to raise your hand. Oh, you remember. But did that go well? And do you remember it being really quick? And really awkward? Maybe so. Or maybe you didn't have that talk with your parents. Or whoever it was. And maybe it was your friend that had the talk with you. Right? Here's the thing. If we don't talk about it in the church, I guarantee you, that our culture is talking about it. And kids are learning about it more and more at a younger age. Isn't that right? So this is important that we address the issue. So today, we're going to have the sex talk. I heard this joke about a little girl who was driving around with her mom, and out of the blue, little girl, curiosity, right? She says, "Mom, how old are you?" And Mom says, "Honey, that's not something that you really should ask a woman." So she says, you'll understand when you grow older. You don't ask a person her age. So the girl says, "Oh, whatever." She says, "Mom, how much do you weigh?" She says, "Honey, you just don't ask those questions, all right? You'll understand when you get older." She goes, "Oh, okay, whatever." A little later on, the little girl says, "Mom, why do you and Dad always argue and fight with each other?" Mom gets really annoyed with her. And she's like, "Honey, right now, honestly, I don't want to talk about that. It's a sensitive topic. I just don't want to talk about it now." Okay, fine. She drops her little daughter off at her play date. So the daughter goes to her friend and tells her all about this conversation he has with her mom. And so the friend says, "Hey, I got some helpful advice for you. If you want to know all of that information, all you have to do is go to your mom's bag, pull out her driver's license, and it'll tell you everything that you need to know." So the little girl, she does this. She steals the driver's license for a little minute, takes a look at it, and boom, the light comes on. Oh. So the next time they're in the car, they're driving along, she says, "Hey, Mom, I know something about you." She says, "I know. You're 32 years old." Mom says, "Whoa, how did you find that out?" She goes, "I don't know. Just guess." She goes, "I also know something else about you, Mom. You weigh 130 pounds. And Mom says, "How in the world did you know that?" She goes, "Little bird told me." And she said, "Mom, I know something even more about you." She goes, "I know why you and Dad argue and fight so much." She goes, "Really? What do you know? Why is that?" She says, "It's because you got an F in sex." So today, we're going to make sure that you are not getting an F in sex. Especially for you single folks. Let me start with the great myth in our culture regarding sex. This is it. Ready? Our culture, our surrounding culture, in all that they do, media, film, every message they send to us. Okay? You don't even have to be looking for this. It's just all around. The message that is sent is that sex is just a physical thing. Yeah, like sex, it's like basketball. Or baseball. We even use baseball metaphors for it, you know? It's like football. You know, like actually it is more like football, tackling, and except you stay on the ground longer, right? And it's like that. It's just physical. But here's the thing. If you treat your sexuality as if it was just physical, you will end up hurting yourself, damaging, injuring your soul at the very deep levels of your being. Sex is not just a physical activity. God designed it in a way that it is connected to your personhood, it's connected to the depths of your soul, it's connected to your identity as a man and as a woman. So, let me throw some awkward questions at you right now to prove my point. If sex is just physical, then why is it that when a child is abused sexually, why is it that the impact of that abuse has a way of following that child all the way through his adult life or her adult life? Okay? And when they're older and they're more capable of dealing with the pain, why is it so difficult to shake off that experience? Why can't they just put on their big boy pants and move on? Why is that? Because we know there's more to sex than that. You know, I was reading in the news a week ago too about all of the sex scandals and the abuse taking place in the Catholic Church, especially the LA Archdiocese here, and then they've uncovered new information, right, about how the diocese sort of didn't report the incidents of child abuse whenever those priests who were doing this finally confessed, and so it's just this big mess. And you've got people who are, 40, 50 years old still dealing with the baggage of that. If sex was just physical, then they should just be able to move right on with their lives. Okay, why is it that rape is so much more devastating to a woman than just being beat up physically? You know, you get beat up physically, there's physical abuse, and when you go to court for the restraining order, you call the police, and then you just kind of move away, you stay away, and you move on. But when you're raped, why is it that while a woman will report being beat up physically, but when they're raped, they feel like they have to carry the shame of that all throughout their lives? Why is it? If sex is just physical. How come it is that whenever someone comes to me, and this has happened in the past, as a pastor, of course, you get this kind of thing, when they come to me and they say, Pastor, I've got to share with you something that's just been really bothering me, something I've never told anyone before, something that's just a deep, deep secret of mine. How come people who come to me like that, they tell me about this deep, burdensome secret? It's never, Pastor, I was driving on the freeway once, and in traffic, and I was all alone in the car, and I was just so frustrated that I used the carpool lane. It's never something trivial like that. It's always something that has to do with sex and their sexuality. Why is it? And by the way, this one, somewhat proven by research, okay? Why is it that men with the deepest sexual issues, as in clinically addicted, like sex addicts, in the vice grip of sexual addiction, why is it that when you dig underneath their lives and their history, there's almost always, all right, I'll be objective. Why is there always an absent or uninvolved or missing father? Why is that? Like psychologists can look at that person's life and say, oh, yeah, missing father, absent father, abusive father. I could have predicted that behavior. Why is that? If sex was just physical, why is it that your deepest regrets are of a sexual nature? The answer is because sex and sexuality is much more than just a physical thing. And yet, the culture in which we live treats it as if that's all it was. Hey man, it was just sex, bro, you know. sex. It was physical. That's all it is. We were young, we were drunk, we were at spring break, we were at that party, we were getting high, and then we just slipped. What's the big deal? Just move on with your life. Oh yeah, and she got pregnant, by the way, and you know what? You have the abortion, that's fine. Move on. It's just a physical thing. On the surface, that's the way our culture treats sexuality. And everyone, listen, whether you're a Christian or not, everyone who treats it that way, sooner or later realizes the hard truth that sex is much more than a physical thing. And to treat it as if it was will damage you to the depths of your being. Back in the 17th and 18th century, there was a family by the name of Stradivari that was into making violins. And the violins that they made were called Stradivarius violins. Now, those of you who are musicians, you know that Stradivari, the way they crafted this instrument was so amazing and incredible that it had this heavenly sound. And everyone else around who were, trying to make violins, they were trying to replicate this sound. They could not replicate the sound of a Stradivarius violin. And so, these things, as you can imagine, as the years go by, they would just increase in value. I mean, I think in 2010, they sold a Stradivarius violin that belonged to one of Napoleon Bonaparte's generals, like in the 1600s, all right? They sold that instrument finally for $3.6 million. Stradivarius violin. Now, I have here with me Stradivarius violin. Just kidding, it's not Stradivarius. You think I'd put a Stradivarius in a case like this? Oh my goodness, crazy. But just humor me for a moment. This is a Stradivarius. Any musicians here in the front row? Let me see. Yeah, I'll use the young person. How about that? How about here? And you take this, and I want you to just. This is a Stradivarius. Okay? I hold like that. You can just fiddle around with it. Just fiddle around with it. Just pluck the strings. Do something. You know how to play violin? You don't, right? Okay, yeah, but you've never touched a violin before, right? Okay, yeah. So just touch it. Just experiment. Do whatever. Turn the knobs.
Hit the floor.
I don't know what to do. That's it just makes a sound. Just try it. See? Yeah. You know what? Go ahead and pass it around. Pass it around. Just let people just handle it. Yeah. There you go. See? Some people even know what's useful. Folks, as they're doing this, this is how we treat our sexuality. It's how our culture treats our sexuality. Okay, you can bring my Stradivarius back to me. Men, this is how our culture tells us to treat our sexuality. And yet, we know intuitively that we, and women especially, are more valuable than a piece of wood. You are more valuable than a piece of wood. You are more finely crafted. And your sexuality cannot be replaced. There are no spare parts for this. All right? See, the thing that makes sex so precious and so fragile and so valuable is that God created it for this thing we call intimacy. Intimacy. Now, of course, God created it also for this thing called procreation. In fact, when God created the world, or before He created the world, I can imagine Him in conference with His angels and Him tossing around all these ideas. And He's saying, hey guys, I got this great idea. I'm going to create a bunch of animals. Yes, and I'm going to give them this amazing gift called sex. The angels all said, what sex? He says, oh, you guys aren't going to believe it, you'll never experience it. But I'm going to give it to them, and they're going to use this beautiful gift to fulfill my commission to multiply and fill the earth. And he says, here's the great part. I'm going to make a creature called a human being. And I'm going to make them in my image, and I'm going to let them have sex too. But here's the thing, because they are made in my image, I'm going to take the sex thing with them to a whole nother level. Like, it's not just going to be about the perpetuation of the human race. It's not just going to be about procreation. I'm going to create something with which they can experience a deep level of intimacy with each other. And that experience, because they are made in my image, that experience is going to reflect the kind of intimacy that I want them to have with me. Listen, passionate, white hot, full on, nothing hidden, fearless, shame free, no rejection, no fear of comparison. What a powerful, fragile gift. And God says it's going to be a picture. It's going to be a picture of the kind of intimacy and the depth of oneness I want them to share with me. Here's the amazing thing. Over 2,000 years ago, the Apostle Paul, the Scriptures, were saying the exact same thing I'm telling you today. I want you to see this. And I want to frame it for you, because in case you're here today, and you're kind of on that side of things where you're saying, the Bible, that's a little too conservative for my taste when it comes to the whole sexuality thing. Pastor, sorry, or I don't subscribe to the Christianity thing today, or ever. It's okay. But I want to frame this for you, because you may think that religion is has kind of had a conservative approach to sex. But historically, and in general, religion has not upheld or honored marital faithfulness or sexual fidelity. Religion, historically, in general, has been against sex, or has not been against sex outside of marriage. In fact, religions, historically, have celebrated and included all kinds of sexual expression in their worship rituals. See, the most popular one of those rituals is prostitution. See, in the religious environment of the ancient world, sex and religion, they just go together. And there was no real boundary that said sex should be reserved for the marriage covenant. In fact, in ancient Israel, all the surrounding nations in ancient Israel, all of those man-made religious nations, okay, they would have laughed at this idea that you should reserve sex for marital faithfulness and in the marriage covenant. They would have laughed at that. Only in Israel did they have a God who said, you will not commit adultery. Only in Israel. In fact, Moses, if Moses was just another guy trying to lead another man-made religion, it would have made more sense for Moses to bend the rules a little bit and accommodate for all the loose sexual practices in his day and in his age. It's kind of like those modern-day cult leaders. We see these guys come up from time to time, right? These guys that come up and say, I'm the Messiah, follow me. The David Koresh type. We see that from time to time. And did you ever notice? Like the guys that do that, the guys that create their own religion, their own sort of religious cult around themselves, I'm the Messiah. You ever notice that they use that authority to sleep with as many women as possible? You ever wonder why that is? It's almost like the minute that man creates his own religion and says, sex can be done in my way, the minute man creates their own religion, it's almost like women just automatically start being treated like a commodity. Interesting feature. And yet, when God says in the law, in the Ten Commandments, He says, hey, you shall not commit adultery. Meaning to say, sex was intended to be shared between one woman and one man for a lifetime. And then, right, Jesus, hundreds of years later, comes on the scene. And he starts saying the same thing, only Jesus starts to be a little more strict about it. He narrows this law down to even more radical form. He says, hey, remember that one commandment? No, don't commit adultery? Let me tell you what the heart of the issue is. If you even look at a woman lustfully, or let's modernize it, if you look at a man lustfully, you've already committed adultery. You've already carved a pathway towards adultery. So it's not just the physical act that is the sin. It's when it starts in your mind. Okay, so this applies to everybody, including married couples. Jesus says, hey, one man, one woman, faithful to each other in a growing relationship of intimacy for a lifetime. And then the Apostle Paul comes on the scene many years later. And he starts planting churches in these pagan cultures like Ephesus and Philippi and Corinth. And he starts looking at all these new Christians that are coming to life, right, in Christ. And then he goes, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this picture. Because here you are coming to church on Sunday, listening to the sermon and the message. But when I look at your sexual behavior, you look just like the culture. You look just like it is out there. He goes, something's not right here. Something's wrong here. In fact, I'm going to tell you something that was never told you growing up because you grew up in this pagan society where sex and religion just mixed together. It was natural for your parents to go to the temple and worship the goddess Diana and for your dad to go and have sex with a temple prostitute. That was just the way it was back then. I get it now. So I'm going to tell you something, says the Apostle Paul. I'm going to tell you and show you what God's design for sex really is. And he starts out, he says, look, first of all, flee sexual immorality, which can be defined as basically any kind of sex outside of marriage or before marriage.